The Art of Being Ruled. Wyndham Lewis. Original publication 1926. 1989 edition. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 8. The Vicious Circle. Chapter 2. The Intolerant Tradition of the Anglo-Saxon. These disparaging remarks, for in employing the epithet petit bourgeois I have gone as far as human vituperation will go, do not, of course, apply to those people whom a displacement of the sex psychology marks out for physical paradox. The most agreeable inverts to be met, and everyone, in post-war society, meets a great number of every sort, are the true blue inverts, those who, whatever the orthodoxy of the moment, would certainly be unaffected by it, and would be there busy with all the rather complicated arrangements incident to their favorite pursuit. This male pole type of invert is often entirely free from that feminine bias, resulting in caricature so often, of the female of the genus, or that of the convert to inversion, the most fanatical of all. What this male invert thinks of his female it is impossible to say without being one yourself. But certainly he gives the impression of being much more male in the traditional and doctrinaire sense than any other male. His pride is often enormous in his maleness. If perhaps a little over-fine and even mad, he can meet on equal terms the male of any other species, either the lion, the male of the farmyard fowl, the samurai, the powdered male gallant of the Stuart stage. The frantic and monstrous cock, that notorious nobleman, Monsieur le Comte de Six-Foix, of the Casanova dispensation, he would easily put to flight. Just as there are a few born revolutionaries, but in great numbers people who are revolutionary because other people are, so in the ranks of each respective legion of revolt today there is the small nucleus of pucka material, the regulars, and the sheep-like indoctrinated majority. So it is that the neglected, despised, and rejected adept of Sodom, so well described in his formerly outlawed state by Proust, suddenly finds himself, owing to one of those freaks peculiar to political life, the leader of a highly disciplined host. It must be an Arabian Nights entertainment for some of the more hardened old perverts. All their life they have been chivied from pillar to post, till very recently living in the shadow of the Oscar Wilde case, the British equivalent of the affaire Dreyfus. Then all at once, as though by magic, they find themselves princes of Sodom. Every university in Christendom is pouring out, as thick as herrings, shoals of their natural prey, duly indoctrinated and suitably polished. They must rub their old heavily painted eyes and pinch their corseted ribs to ascertain if they are dreaming or not. If the physiology of abnormal love as of normal love does not seem to you a matter of great importance, if you have not the Puritan itch or the spur of an over-sharp vanity to make such things important and, indirectly, mentally exciting, if righteousness as Arnold would say, or sanctimoniousness as Butler corrected him, is not your strong point, there, you would think, must be an end of the matter as far as you are concerned. But you would find very soon that you would reckon without your host. First of all you would discover that other people were not so accommodating as yourself. Indeed, a violent and jealous intolerance, you would begin to notice, accompanied most people's devotion to a sex fashion, as indeed to any other fashion. You would find, if you began to examine the machinery of fashion, that all fashions today tend to be organized on religious lines, and that, where sex especially is concerned, the same Puritan spirit, in the Anglo-Saxon countries, that made people in the Anglo-Saxon past such intolerant maniacs where immorality and all sexual enormities were concerned, makes them also, when they are recruited to an opposite fashion, just as snobbishly intolerant on behalf of the immorality to which they have gleefully, and with a sense of diabolical naughtiness, surrendered. You will perhaps recall the traditional laissez-vivre of the French, and the wide measure of liberty left to personal taste, so that in the streets of Paris, the home of fashion, it has always seemed impossible to astonish or attract the attention of the passer-by, by even the most revolutionary costume, whereas any departure from fashionable convention has been met, always, with fierce resentment or fierce ridicule in England. Oscar Wilde invariably referred, I have been told, to get your hair cut as the English national anthem. Far more important, you would find that this prairie fire of sex revolution, of feminism and then of inversion, altered fundamentally the status of ideas socially. As the psychic element existing in even the simplest sexual operation escapes people, so the precurrent nature of a great sex fashion is either not understood or not admitted. Certain people, highly educated and belonging to millionaire circles, indulge in an ancient, universally prevalent, vice or pleasure, of a privileged and exceptional kind, which, because it seems to contradict nature's arrangements, we call unnatural. And there, for most people, is the end of it. It is on the pleasure or distraction basis alone that discussion of it is relevant. That attitude resembles another obtuseness that sees in the newspaper, cinema, or wireless only one of the innocent, non-political distractions of mankind, or that attributes serious political significance solely to the Parliament and Crown. Mr. Gossip in the newspaper is a harmless, idle, gossipy fellow. The novel, again, is as little of a political force as little Jackie's new rag doll or scooter. Those weighty columns that occupy the center of the Times, dealing with matters of patent consequence, or, to contrast with the mere novel, A Political History of England, for instance, they are the only things worthy to rank as politics. It is the mistake illustrated elsewhere by a cutting from the Sporting Times. The social value of ideas, you would find altered, then, by this revolution in a novel sense. Not only was it a case of one set of ideas being exchanged for another set, as usually happens, but in place of anything in the shape of an idea, a sensation had been installed, you would discover. The very organ responsible for the making of an idea would be looked at askance. The sex revolution started as sex, but had ended as something else, rather in the way that religious ecstasy may begin as religion and end as sex. The various forms it had taken since the war did not, as they became more social and less political, become less militant. So this revolution had often little to do with sex ultimately. And then, of course at last, it might enter your head that in the first place, too, not only in its result, but in its first motive, it was not sexual either. The Socialists wished to abolish the family, because it costs too much. We have heard Proudhon saying, "It is strange that the Socialists so early in the day should have been preoccupied to that extent with ways and means and displayed such an anxious foresight. May it not be, too, that all the phases of the sex revolt, from the suffragette to the joy boy, are equally political at the start, as they certainly become at the finish? Is it not the same old hag that in a morality would be labeled power, and for whom pleasure, in the simplest sense, means very little, who has pumped this batch of related fashions?